Thanks for joining us. You've tuned into Arirang's Within the Frame. I'm Han Da-eun in Seoul. One of the most pressing issues in the tech world is regulating the rapid advancements in artificial intelligence. Leading the charge in this endeavor, EU lawmakers have introduced the EU AI Act, a first-of-its-kind regulation aiming to harmonize rules on AI models and systems across the bloc. While hopes are high that the law will lead to safe and ethical use of artificial intelligence across various sectors, this pioneering regulation has also sparked significant debate, especially after some major AI power players have pulled the plug on release of its advanced AI models in Europe over regulatory concerns. Balancing AI regulation and innovation. That's the topic of our discussion today, and to help us navigate the complexities and implications of this landmark regulation, attorney An Jun-seong, a former research fellow at the Korea Information Society Development Institute, joins us in the studio. It's always great to have you with us.
Thank you.
And joining us from London is Dr. Cosmina Dorobantu, co-director of Public Policy Program at the Alan Turing Institute. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
All right, Dr. Dorobantu, let's start with you. So EU lawmakers have published the EU Artificial Intelligence Act that aims to harmonize rules and AI models across Europe. First, give us more details about the law and how it will be implemented.
So the EU AI Act is a landmark piece of legislation, and after many years of hard work, it was officially published earlier this month. Now, in drafting this piece of legislation, the EU started from two basic ideas. The first is that AI is a general-purpose technology that feeds into almost everything. It underpins a huge variety of functions, from email spam filters to credit decisions. And the second basic idea is that some AI uses are low risk and uncontroversial. So not many people care that AI is powering our email spam filters, but other uses have higher risks. A lot of people care about AI feeding into our credit scores, for example, and rightfully so. Now, starting from these two basic ideas, that AI can be used in everything, that some uses are almost risk-free, while others are high risk, the EU decided to produce this piece of legislation, the EU AI Act, which one applies to all AI systems placed or used within the EU, and two, classifies AI systems according to risk and ensures that the obligations of developers and deployers of high-risk systems are much more onerous than the obligations that the developers and deployers of limited risk systems have. Now, in terms of implementation, this is where a lot of detail still needs to be worked out. We know the dates of when the EU AI Act will start to bite. Some bits of the Act will apply as early as the 2nd of February 2025. Some other bits won't apply until the 2nd of August 2027. But apart from the dates of when the EU AI Act will take effect, there is still a lot that we, and certainly the European Commission and the EU member states, don't know at this point.
For our viewers, just to clarify for our viewers once again, so the legislation was approved by the Council of the EU in May and will formally enter into force in early next month, but will be implemented in phases, as you pointed out, with an aim of a full implementation by 2026 to 7. So it's a very comprehensive and specific law, isn't it? So it'll be important for businesses to stay up to date on which provisions apply when. And of course, it's certainly a groundbreaking law, pioneering a new era for AI regulation. Now, Mr. An, the EU AI Act, as we mentioned at the top, is the world's first comprehensive set of AI regulations. How would that impact global efforts in building AI regulatory frameworks?
That's a very interesting question, actually. It's the first time, actually, I decided to change my printer after reading the EU AI Act, actually. You know how many pages there? so I am using the bubble jet, and it takes forever. I stopped it
So
because it's like several hundred pages.
Switching your printer.
Things that what happened was it's too comprehensive in a way. So if you're the industry expert or if you're doing business on AI industries, you'll be very confused very easily because there was so much information. So sometimes that simple, is best. If you understand the law clearly, it's easier. But if it's so much law and the exceptions and exception to exceptions, they're very confusing. So it's very hard to, in terms of implementation stage, and if you want to enforce any type of law, it has to be very clear to the public what they do, what they shouldn't do, right? My personal comment about EU AI, too complicated. So I think that's one of the things they have to simplify the process. Also the public, awareness, the issues that educate the public or the foreign companies what to do and what not to do. I think that's really two things. And about the EU AI Act, big picture, I think that the two major points about EU AI. First one is that they have provide clear categorization based on the risk basis, right? And what's the point that now is everybody knows that what to do and what not to do upon entering into EU market, right? And second thing is that it has very strong, heavy, I would say, the penalty against any violation. It's very heavy, and if you check the amount of money penalty you can get it, that's really, very significant amount of money, and means that basically, to me, it sounds like a criminal penalty because it's very high the way they regulate it. So my prediction about what happened how would happen to EU AI Act and the global standard in terms of international standardization issue, maybe since the EU taking first movers advantage, and other countries like the US and other Asian countries, even the China maybe use some of the framework, means that based on the risk basis, perhaps. But if they want to try to any kind of compromise, they might go for EU framework with a lighter regulation, a lighter penalty on it, rather than really too strong penalty on it. Right. That's my view on the EU AI Act.
So it could set a global benchmark, but it's way too complicated, and it slaps hefty fines and penalties. Those are two important, I think, points that you pointed out.
Maybe they might use the frame. But much lighter way of application in terms of enforcement. Right.
Dr. Dorobantu, Mark Zuckerberg's Meta decided not to release an advanced version of its AI model in the EU, blaming the decision on what it called unpredictable behavior of regulators. How do you see this, and what are the implications?
Yes, so this is interesting, and it relates to the release of a multimodal llama model in the EU. Now, Meta's decision is not driven so much by the EU AI Act as it is driven by how various European data protection agencies are enforcing GDPR, which is the European data protection legislation. Now, large language models such as Llama are trained on a huge range of data, much of which is taken from the internet. The issue is that Meta intends to use all the public and non-public user data from platforms like Facebook and Instagram, with the exception of chats between individuals, to train its AI models. Some data protection agencies within the EU, such as the Irish Data Protection Commission, are fighting against that. And that is what is driving Meta's decision to not release a multimodal llama model in the EU. Now, although the spotlight is on the EU when it comes to Meta's decision, it is important to remember that various jurisdictions around the world, not just within the EU, are pondering what data is fair to use for training large language models. And in the US, for example, the New York Times is suing OpenAI and Microsoft for copyright infringement. Why? Because New York Times copyrighted content was used to train AI technologies such as ChatGPT. So this debate about what data can and cannot be used to train AI technologies goes way beyond the borders of the EU. Although, as you rightly point out, for this specific story, it is very much an EU-driven story.
I think you highlighted an important point there that Meta's retreat is not entirely about the EU AI Act, but its focus is on the GDPR. And Meta's retreat from offering advanced AI services in the EU, it could also limit the availability of cutting-edge AI tools in the region and potentially hinder EU companies' ability to compete globally, right? And hence the big dilemma between innovation and regulation. And we'll discuss that in more detail. But before that, Mr. An, how would the new set of EU AI Act impact South Korean companies now striving to catch up with major global AI power players?
Very interesting question. I have a think about question many times. I just maybe brief comment on the Mark comment about this very unpredictable issue. Actually, if we look carefully read the actual text of EU AI Act, I think that Mark lawyers told him very clearly about what to do, not to do, because that if you look at it, there's many ways they can play with it. There's a law, right? They have a legal framework, right? In a way, there's in Korea like constitution, law, like enforcement decree, president's decree. There's a level, right? In a way, they can change the category, right? The four categories. They don't have to pass the actual EU level. They can just amend their appendix very easily. In a way, I think this happens in the trade dispute. And USTR very often complain to the Korean government, say, you change the law around, because you can change, if you want to change the law act, right, you have to go to National Assembly in Korea, so which is very difficult and very political, right, politically better there. Or if you go to presidential decree changing, you can just, president can change it, like the executive order in the United States, and, Biden can sign it, whatever he wanted. That's what happened to the EU, US executive order. That's what happened. So about the EU AI Act, the way they play the structure their law is very, to me, from someone who studied legal area, it's like very suspicion there, because they can they can change anything very often, especially high risk, and then we don't know what happened. One of the things I like to comment on it, AI, the world of AI is already here, actually. The problem is just we don't know what to do. And we don't know what to do and how they develop in the future. For example, your cell phone already have AI enabled, like you call Siri, okay? Or your Apple phone, I'm using the Samsung, but you can have an Apple. And what happened was the AI is everywhere. Depends on how you define it, categorize specific embedded, the software, AI embedded software, which it placed inside a product. That's very hard to differentiate how much is it general purpose AI or what. It's very difficult to say because it's a very technical one and we don't know how it will develop in the future. So let's go back to the South Korean approach. The same thing. If you're the South Korean company who making AI product or services, they will face the same question. And what should we do before entering the European market, because it's not clear, even if what happened, we change the process and some changing to comply with the EU regulation, they could change very often, very easily they change it. What we do is that try to avoid the level 4, high risk. You can be used to say, because there's specific categories there. But the problem is that the EU can change very easily what kind of things categorize on the high risk. So you can manufacture a new product, it takes maybe 1 year or 2, and try to, by the time you export to EU market, it might be categorized to level 4. And that's the really concerning on the, I understand Mark, I agree with the Mark on this, because there's some kind of suspicions on the non-European companies and industry about looking at the EU AI Act.
So from a legal perspective, since you're an attorney, it seems like there will be a lot more unexpected changes and complications along the way, even after the introduction of the EU AI Act. And it sounds like there are a lot more questions than answers at the current phase about how to regulate artificial intelligence.
Yeah, basically, AI is already here. But no country, no government saying agree with it, right? It's there already, but people say, oh, how will you regulate in the future? No, it's already here. And in the EU AI Act does not talk about the one already existing at this time. And how are we going to answer? I really was wondering, ask the EU Parliament how we're going to talk about it, because how we're going to do the embedded technology, anything like, let's say, have a Samsung or some navigation technology in the electronic vehicle, right? Is it the general AI? If you think about it in the future, AI is already everywhere, and in the future will be much more developed, much more developed technology. And maybe we're dealing with what we say in the future. We have the AI humanoid, the robot everywhere, made every household. That's what the Tesla, right? They're saying Tesla, the president, right? So same thing. We don't know what happened. But then my concern is that, without answering the question at this time and the future current position, and they talk about the future, just my concern.
And Mr. An, Korean lawmakers have been holding numerous discussions, but a legislation that would serve as the country's basic AI Act is still stuck in limbo. We've talked a little bit about this the last time you came in, but for our viewers who may not be up to date, what are the key points of contention?
When I read the Korean legislation, I was it was a joke. The controversial regulation point is that no regulation is our regulation. I was like, what? And there was a big debate on the National Assembly. Should we remove this provision or not? They were talking for years for whether we remove the provision. There was no regulation.
An actual
provision say we have no regulation for AI. And they was debating for 2 years, should we remove this? And then during that time, EU passed the law. Now in force, right? Not fully enforced, but so I think that EU is taking the advantage as a first mover. But while the Korean Parliament, National Assembly doing nothing, like sitting dog and talking political jokes, right? I think that's very concerning, and we really have to get together, find out what to do, and try to do, help the industry to progress, right?
Dr. Dorbantu, striking the delicate balance between regulation and innovation seems to be the key in the future of AI. What's your assessment of the EU AI Act in this regard?
Yeah, so look, many people see regulation and innovation as being sort of at the opposite ends of the spectrum. But I truly believe that sensible regulation can and should act as an enabler for innovation. And this is absolutely the case with AI. I do not think that we can have AI innovation without sensible regulation. There will be a huge public backlash against AI technologies if we fail to set the right guardrails in place. And without public support, none of our aspirations for AI, from boosting productivity to perhaps creating a more equal society, will materialize. Now, is the EU AI Act the perfect piece of legislation? It is not, and I don't think anyone would claim that, but it is a start in the right direction, and that matters. We will learn an awful lot over the coming years about what works and what doesn't, what needs tweaking and what doesn't need tweaking. But for now, within the EU at least, businesses have some certainty over what the rules of the game will be. And that's good. Regulatory certainty is crucial for innovation.
So regulation and innovation, they don't sit on the opposite ends, but rather they should go hand in hand. And the EU AI Act, although it may not be perfect, it's a good start. Now, staying with you, Dr. Dorbantu, President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, has secured 5 more years in the top EU job. Where does she stand in AI regulation?
So the official statements that Ursula von der Leyen put out tell us quite a bit about where she stands. She sees the EU AI Act as the first ever comprehensive legal framework on artificial intelligence worldwide. She sees it as a historic moment that transposes European values to a new era. And she sees it as a piece of legislation that makes a substantial contribution to the development of global guardrails for trustworthy AI. So she is very much behind European efforts to regulate AI. But it is important to note that regardless of how she feels about the EU AI Act, the Act is here to stay. It has been officially published. It is done and dusted. The job of the European Commission right now is to oversee the implementation, but the legislation is in place. That bit is done.
All right. Mr. An, South Korea is tasked with devising AI regulations while also further fostering the country's AI industry growth, which also includes supporting local firms' expansion into global markets as well. Sounds like a daunting task. What strategies do we need?
It's $1 million question.
That no one seems to have clear answers
yeah,
for
because
now.
we don't know what will happen tomorrow, right? Well, I think that the dilemma as a Korean company is dealing with, right? Now we have to looking at, there's another big mega market we have to keep carefully looking at, because the EU side is more like, I should say it's a more protection perspective, because that most of the global AI companies are US-based, like Google, Microsoft, Facebook, and relatively speaking, EU side, there's not much competition there. And looking at the Korean side, it's much less competition. I mean, that means that we need to get really work with very well with the both sides. So consumption market, and there's a supply side and demand side. So what we try to do, I guess that what we have to do, that if you're big enough, the Korean company is big enough, maybe you set up R&D center in the Belgium, dealing with the lobbying. And if you're small, not big enough to really support that kind of lobbying activity, I mean, maybe they should do, continental-based, specific country basis, EU-based specific, in a way, because that it's not one size fit all situation now. You have to carefully what they do, what not to do, and I think U.S. also will introduce this, someday after the November election, there will be new legislation government, and there will come up with some legislation work. So we have to, you're developing something, and technology itself, right? Even the deepfake, the EU AI Act is not illegalized. As long as you sort of notice this is a deepfake, it's legal. So you have to see that what kind of things they have it, and is there any loophole there, and then try to find it. It's not about the technology itself, how you applied it, how you market, how you brand that product in the EU market. I think that's one of the marketing strategies, right? They have to carefully look at.
All right. Although there are still so many unanswered questions and there's so much chaos still surrounding AI regulation, I think we had a very meaningful discussion today. Thank you so much, Mr. An, for your very practical analysis.
A pleasure. Right.
And many thanks to you as well, Dr. Dorbantu, for sharing your valuable insights.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of the show. Thank you for watching, and be sure to tune in same time tomorrow to join our conversation. Goodbye for now.